I remember the exact moment the gaming industry stopped taking itself so seriously. We were drowning in gritty, realistic shooters and massive, exhausting open worlds with hundreds of hours of map markers. Everyone was trying to be the most cinematic, the most photorealistic, the most intense. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, a horde of clumsy, brightly colored jelly beans stumbled onto the scene, falling all over each other to grab a floating crown. It was chaotic, it was completely ridiculous, and it was exactly what the world needed. Looking back at Fall Guys now, sitting here in 2026, it is wild to realize how a game about obstacle courses fundamentally changed the landscape of the Battle Royale genre. It stripped away the guns, the armor plating, and the aggressive voice chats, replacing them with giant spinning hammers, fake doors, and slime. But beneath that cute, candy-coated surface was a fiercely competitive environment that tested friendships and broke controllers just as effectively as any hardcore competitive shooter ever could. There was always a strange, underlying tension to this game, a feeling that something brutal was hiding right behind the bright smiles of those little characters. That hidden darkness in the game design is something most people completely missed during the initial hype, but it is the exact reason why the game survived as long as it did.
To really understand the legacy of Fall Guys, you have to look at the world design and the bizarre narrative context it exists in. On the surface, there's no story. There are no cutscenes explaining why you are here, no grand villain to defeat, and no world to save. But the environmental storytelling paints a fascinating, almost dystopian picture. You are participating in a massive, televised game show set in a place called the Blunder Dome. It is a universe entirely constructed for the entertainment of an unseen audience. Hundreds of thousands of these bean-like creatures are dropped into the sky, funneling through massive floating obstacle courses suspended over bottomless pits or vats of pink slime. The architecture is a mix of bouncy castles, brutalist concrete, and neon lights. It is basically Takeshi's castle crossed with the Roman Colosseum. Every level is a carefully constructed trap designed to humiliate the participants. And the characters themselves, these silent, waddling beans, never show anger or fear. They just smile, wave their little arms, and run directly into giant swinging pendulums. The lore might not be spoon-fed to you through dialogue trees, but the entire setup creates a brilliantly absurd world that feels distinctly unique even years later. There's a deeply unsettling undertone to how cheerfully these characters march toward their own elimination. The gameplay mechanics are the absolute core of why this game worked so well, and they are surprisingly divisive when you really break them down. In an era where modern games give you a dozen different movement options, grappling hooks, wall runs, and slide cancels, Fall Guys gave you three basic actions. You can jump, you can dive, and you can grab. That is all you get. The controls feel intentionally heavy and unresponsive at times. Your character is top-heavy, prone to stumbling, and heavily affected by momentum. If you land at a slight angle, you roll. If someone bumps into you midair, you lose all your forward velocity and drop like a rock. At first, this feels incredibly frustrating for anyone used to precise platformers. You hit the jump button and pray the physics engine decides to cooperate. But once you spend enough time with it, you realize the physics engine is actually the true final boss of the game. Mastering Fall Guys is not about having the fastest reflexes. It is about understanding momentum, predicting the chaos of the crowd, and manipulating the physics to your advantage. And just when you think you have mastered the jump timing, the game introduces a mechanic that turns every single player into a potential threat. That mechanic is the grab button, and it essentially serves as the combat system of Fall Guys. There are no weapons, no health bars, and no attack combos, but the ability to grab another player is the most powerful tool in the game. It is a purely psychological weapon. You can use it to hold someone back right before a jump, ruining their momentum and sending them falling into the slime. You can grab someone on a narrow beam to assert dominance. The grab mechanics created a unique form of social combat. You have to read the body language of the other beings.
If you are standing on a shrinking platform in a final survival round and you see another player slowly waddling towards you with their arms outstretched, you instantly feel a spike of pure adrenaline. It is a terrifying sight. The tension of waiting to see if a player is friendly or if they are going to push you into the void is a thrill that very few games have ever managed to replicate. This simple mechanic turned a harmless platforming race into a cutthroat psychological thriller where you can never truly trust anyone around you, not even your own teammates.
Speaking of teammates, the level design in this game is a masterclass in varied pacing and sociology. A standard show runs you through different types of rounds, slowly whittling down the lobby from a massive crowd to a handful of finalists. You have the race rounds, which are pure chaos. Levels like DoorDash or Dizzy Heights force you to navigate through a stampede of other players. Getting stuck in the middle of the pack is a nightmare, as the collective weight of 40 other players can physically push you off the map. Then there is the psychological experiment known as Seesaw. This level requires players to balance giant tilting platforms to progress. It sounds simple, but it perfectly highlights the selfish nature of multiplayer gaming. Everyone wants to be first, so everyone rushes to one side, tipping the seesaw completely vertical and sending the entire crowd sliding to their doom. The only way to win is to wait, balance the scale, and cooperate with the very people you are trying to eliminate. It is brilliant game design masquerading as absolute stupidity. Then you have the survival rounds, where the floor is disappearing or giant rollers are trying to sweep you off the edge. These rounds require a completely different mindset. You stop rushing and start managing space, looking for safe zones and isolating yourself from the griefers. And then there are the team games. For a long time, team games were the most hated part of the experience. You could run a perfect race, survive the hardest obstacles, and then get eliminated because your randomly assigned teammates could not figure out how to push a giant ball down a hill. But over time, the chaotic nature of these team games became part of the charm. They forced you to adopt, to try and carry your team, or to play defense when everyone else was brainlessly chasing a golden egg. It was a chaotic ecosystem, and understanding how to manipulate that ecosystem was the only way to consistently reach the finals. The final rounds are where all the mechanics, the physics, and the psychological warfare come together. Hexagon is arguably one of the greatest final levels ever designed in a multiplayer game. You start at the top of a massive tower made of hexagonal tiles. The catch is that every time you step on a tile, it disappears a second later. Below you is another layer of tiles and another until you hit the slime at the very bottom. It is a brilliant test of strategy, pathfinding, and resource management. Do you run as fast as you can to cut off other players and drop them down? Or do you slowly hop from tile to tile, conserving your space and staying as high up as possible? The sheer panic of looking down, realizing there are no tiles left below you, and desperately trying to plan a route across a crumbling floor is an experience that holds up perfectly even in 2026. The developers constantly added new finals over the years, introducing anti-gravity zones, spinning blast balls, and grabbing mechanics, but the core design philosophy always remained the same. You have to outsmart your opponents just as much as you have to outplay them. The addition of blast balls specifically gave players an actual explosive projectile to throw at each other, fundamentally changing the endgame dynamic from evasion to active targeting. It was a massive shift in how the game was played. For a game that seems entirely skill-based and random, there is a surprisingly deep RPG and progression system woven into the fabric of the experience. In most games, you level up your character to get stronger, unlock new abilities, or increase your stats. In Fall Guys, the progression is entirely cosmetic, but it holds an immense amount of social weight. The economy of the game originally revolved around crowns and the fame path. Winning a show gave you a crown, which used to be the only way to purchase the rarest and most prestigious outfits. This created a visible hierarchy in the lobbies. If you saw a player wearing a full golden hot dog suit or a master ninja outfit, you knew immediately that they were a veteran. You knew to stay away from them. The outfits became a badge of honor, a display of your skill and dedication.
The Fame Path acted as a battle pass, offering a constant stream of new colors, patterns, and emotes. The sheer volume of customization options allowed players to craft incredibly specific identities. You could be a pirate with a pigeon head, or a glowing neon skeleton wearing a tutu. This level of personalization gave players a reason to keep coming back day after day, grinding out daily challenges and side quests to earn more currency. The progression system preyed on that fundamental human desire to stand out in a crowd, to show off your achievements without saying a single word.
That shift in the economy is actually one of the most controversial parts of the game's history, and it is impossible to talk about the legacy of Fall Guys without discussing the transition it went through. When Epic Games took over and the game went completely free to play, the entire structure of the reward system changed. The crown currency was essentially retired from the store, replaced by a premium currency that you had to buy with real money. The free path became much more restrictive, and the legendary outfits that used to require pure skill to obtain were suddenly locked behind paywalls. For a lot of the hardcore players, this felt like a massive betrayal. The prestige of a rare outfit was completely lost because you could no longer tell if a player earned it through 100 hard-fought victories or if they just swiped their credit card. It fundamentally altered the social dynamic of the lobbies. The crossover events became overwhelming, turning the game into a bizarre multiverse where Doom Guy, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Godzilla are all running over giant spinning fans together. However, from a 2026 perspective, it is easy to see that this shift is probably the only reason the game survived. The free-to-play model brought in a massive wave of new players, revitalizing the servers and ensuring the game had a consistent player base. It was a harsh pill to swallow for the veterans, but it was a necessary sacrifice to keep the Blunderdome open for business. The game had to evolve to survive the shifting trends of the industry.
Visually, Fall Guys made a very deliberate choice that helped it age incredibly well. While other games from the early 2020s pushed for hyper-realism and are now starting to show their age with outdated lighting or muddy textures, this game embraced a vibrant, plastic, candy-coated art style. Everything looks like it is made of soft foam, bouncy rubber, and shiny plastic. The colors are highly saturated, leaning heavily into bright pinks, blues, and yellows. It looks like a giant interactive toy box. Because the developers did not chase realism, the graphics never actually aged. Booting up the game today, it looks just as crisp and appealing as it did on day one. The animations play a huge role in this timeless quality. The way the beans waddle, the way their arms flail when they fall, and the heavy, satisfying thud they make when they hit the ground are all meticulously crafted to be as expressive as possible. The game conveys so much emotion and comedy purely through physical slapstick. Watching 20 players fail a single jump and pile up at the bottom of a ramp will never not be visually hilarious. The environmental hazards, from the spinning hammers to the giant swinging pendulums, are designed to look like soft playground equipment, which makes the sheer brutality of getting launched across the map even funnier.
Fall Guys earns a solid 4 out of 5 for being a wonderfully chaotic, physics-based party game that perfectly balances accessibility with pure, unadulterated fun. Despite a rocky technical history, including disastrous launch servers and a frustrating vaulting era where classic levels were removed, the introduction of creative mode completely revitalized the experience by giving the community the power to build infinite content. While jumping into the Blunderdome in 2026 is a refreshing break from overly complex modern games, it isn't without its flaws. Players still have to deal with occasionally unfair physics, sluggish input delay, and a highly aggressive corporate monetization model. Ultimately, though, its brilliant sound design, unpredictable gameplay loop, and ability to bring hardcore gamers and beginners together make it an unforgettable masterclass in party game design.